force on the world stage, when America crashed, most of the world followed suit. The world was producing for America, and when America could suddenly not pay for their products, they too fell into a depression. So not only was unemployment apparent in the US, but in places as far away as Chile as well. America was also in charge of propping up the countries ravaged by war in Europe. And when her own financial crisis hit, she could no longer support those faraway nations. Cue fascist dictators to rise. And in the midst of it all, America was also hit by one of the world's worst natural disasters. The drought that hit the Great Plains turned America's bread bowl into America's dust bowl. With the introduction of the tractor, production had gone into overdrive. An area that was never meant to be farmed no longer had anything to tie the soil down, so it simply started to blow away as the rains never came. This was the America Woody Guthrie had experienced, and this was the America Woody first started to sing about. The people in the Dust Bowl lost more than most. The land could no longer provide them with their livelihood, and their inability to pay their bills left them with no home. So they took to the road, hearing that there were jobs farther west in California. These migrant workers became known as Okies, because it was assumed that they all hailed from Oklahoma. But when they got to California, it soon became apparent that there was no land for them to farm. And by 1935, 200,000 people had left the Great Plains to head to California, and Woody was one of them. These destitute people had to be clever to work with what they had, and when they arrived in California and realized it didn't answer all of their prayers, they set up shanty towns of whatever materials they could find. They also made fashion statements out of whatever they could find, and my dress is based off of a feed sack dress, very typical of the Okies and people living in the Dust Bowl. And Solange is going to come up and talk to us about the fashion of the 1950s.
So, as Diana has talked about how different areas were hit and how the Panhandle, which was parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, was hit very badly, and these were the people that lost everything, and when they tried to pick it up and go somewhere, they're like, no, get out of here, we don't want you here, there's not something for us, we don't want you. If you look back at fashion from the 1930s, it begins to change from the 20s with the more streamlined look, the more, like, there was not so much an emphasis on the feminine, everything became more boyish, everything became slimmer for both males and females. There was a drop waist, everything sort of changed, it was this completely different decade. But when the Depression hit, things sort of started to turn back. People were looking to Hollywood for inspiration. People were looking for distractions. People brought back the more feminine look for women, for example, and for men, the more, like, I can afford this kind of look. I can afford food, I can afford this, I'm muscular, I'm strong, I'm manly, or I'm feminine, I have this, the tailored in waist, the things were cut on the bias, they were very, there's a lot of pretty again, but this didn't affect everybody. When you look at old pictures from the 30s, there's a lot of very glamorous looking things. You look at the stars that people tended to look at, and you think, wow, but then you look at the rest of the people, and it's not so much. And the idea of the feed sack dress was something that actually became sort of popular in a lot of places, and because it was affordable. It's something you could do. You could feed your chickens, and then you could, feed sacks were starting to come in all these great prints, like they were in flowered prints and checkered prints, and you can make this dress out of it, and you could copy it off of a popular trend, and feel kind of cool, and maybe, you know, you might not like that at first, but maybe, I mean, it was something new still, something different. And for some people, they didn't even have that option, and the stuff they're getting is, you look at the pictures, and you have the longer dresses, they're still go about the ankles. The more you get into migrant workers, the more people are farming or working. The dresses are shorter, it's part of moving, it's part of what they need to do. They're not going to be as pretty, they're not going to be clean. I told Diana not to shower for a few days because she'd probably been like farming and walking around and didn't have access to water, but she didn't like that idea. And so I tried to incorporate some style details, but a lot of it, I mean, things kind of got changed, and we were trying to work with what we had, which is a good lesson from the Depression era, work with what you have. So there's some little things that we kind of changed to work with what we had, and we were inspired by that, so we can say that part. That might not be historically accurate, but we were inspired by the way people worked. But we also have, like, collars were really popular, the Peter Pan collar, sailor collars, things were coming back. The color and the fabric we chose, we looked up a lot of feed sacks and stuff like that. We're looking for stuff because we don't have any feed sacks. I don't have any chickens. I wouldn't have any use for the feed if I brought a feed sack just for the sack, so, yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Solon. Feel free to go this way. So it was really these Okies and the people from the Dust Bowl, ones that would probably be wearing a shorter dress than me, that Guthrie was hanging out with, and who he first started writing songs about. And these songs really started to touch the lives of a lot of people. And I wouldn't come right out and say that Woody is a musical genius, but he had a way with words. And he knew really how to take what people were feeling and put them into song. And most of Woody's songs are actually based off of other songs that were already written. He very rarely wrote any melodies. And the song I sang before, I Ain't Got No Home in This World Anymore, is actually based off of a Carter family song, The World Is Not My Home. And that song is about how this life is terrible because we're living in the Depression, and really you just have to wait until you get to heaven and it's all great and wonderful. And so Woody didn't like that message. He didn't like the idea that this life wasn't good enough, that you had to wait for the next one. And so he would write songs on themes like that. And so Woody didn't have a great life. He moved around a lot. He saw people suffering every day. And over the years, he did have a few commercial radio gigs, but he often did not see eye to eye with the producers, and he didn't want to take that commercial route. He wanted to talk about what he was experiencing, and that wasn't always wonderful, and the producers didn't like them. And so he gave the people a voice, and he supported causes from communism to the unions, and eventually when World War II hit, he was a strong supporter of America and the war and against fascism. And in his own words, he says, I made up songs telling what I thought was wrong and how to make it right. Songs that said what everybody in this country was thinking. And although Woody wanted to tell it like it is, he didn't want people to give up hope. He didn't want to be the Debbie Downer spokesperson of the masses. He wanted people to take control and to live their life to their full potential. And so this next song isn't one that Guthrie actually wrote, but it was originally penned by Gobel Reeves. But he added his own lyrics and his own stamp on it, and it's called Hobo's Lullaby.